Imagine this. You hold the largest gold reserves in the world. For decades, ships arrive loaded with gold. Millions pile up in your treasury, and you go bankrupt 4 times in a row. This is not a fairy tale. This is the history of Spain. This video will teach you 3 things. First, why an abundance of gold did not make Spain rich. It destroyed her instead. Second, what is the difference between a flow of wealth and lasting prosperity? And the states that fail to understand this difference are making the same mistake today. Third, why this historical lesson is personally relevant to you, whether it concerns your personal finances or your view of the world. Remember one thing, this information applies today to oil, to cryptocurrency, to resource export economies in exactly the same way. This is not the past, this is the present. But I have one question for you. If millions were transferred to your account tomorrow without you doing any work, without producing anything, would you become rich? Or would you fall into a trap? Most of you would say, of course I'd become rich. Spain thought the same thing back in the 1500s. Gold kept coming and coming and coming. And with every ship loaded with gold, Spain was sinking a little deeper, but no one could see it. This is one of history's greatest economic paradoxes. And to understand this paradox, we must go back to 1492, to the land where Columbus first set foot. 1532, Peru. Francisco Pizarro, with a force of just 168 men, brings the Inca Empire, thousands strong, to its knees. How? With firearms, horses, and a game. The Inca Emperor, Atahualpa, is taken prisoner. What is demanded as ransom? A room filled with gold. Atahualpa agrees. The room is filled. Pizarro kills him anyway. This is not just the story of one man. This is the beginning of a system. From 1492 to 1600, Spain transported enormous quantities of gold and silver from the American continent to Europe. The amount was so vast that economists called it the price revolution. Economic historian Earl J. Hamilton spent decades researching this data. His 1934 work calculated that the volume of silver flowing into Europe between 1,500 and 1,650 exceeded all of Europe's previous reserves combined. But here is where the interesting question begins. Where did all this wealth go? Did Spain invest this money in production? Did it build factories? Did it develop technology? Or these millions, instead of filling Spain's own treasury, flowed through to other countries? Because Spain did one thing. It bought. Instead of producing, it purchased. This difference changed everything. Imagine a village market. 10 people, 10 loaves of bread, each loaf priced at 1 unit. Now let 50 units of money pour in from outside, but the number of loaves stays the same. What happens? The price of bread rises. This is the most fundamental law of economics. The gold and silver flowing into Spain did exactly this. The money supply increased, but production did not. The result? Inflation. Prices in Spain quadrupled or quintupled between 1,500 and 1,600. This means that even if wages stayed the same, the goods people could buy cost 2 or 3 times more. Economic historian John H. Elliott states this precisely. Spain was buying goods from foreign markets because its own production was insufficient. Gold came in, gold was spent. But that spending went to France, Flanders, England. Spain had essentially become a giant monetary conduit. To put it plainly, gold arrived in Spain, raised prices in Spain, made Spanish producers uncompetitive, and then flowed out to the rest of Europe. There is a paradox here. The country with the most gold benefited least from that gold. Spain at that time was the most powerful empire in the world. But what was this power built on? Production? Technology? No. War. Constant, expensive, exhausting war. Habsburg Spain was fighting on multiple fronts in Europe simultaneously. Against the Ottomans in the Mediterranean, against the Protestants in Flanders, against France in the north, against England at sea. Every front demanded money, a lot of money. According to historians' calculations, Spain declared bankruptcy for the first time in 1557, then in 1575, then in 1596. Then in 1607, 4 major bankruptcies. 4 times. Think about it. The world's wealthiest empire became the world's most indebted state. The mechanism was simple. American gold arrived, and the Habsburgs spent it by taking bank loans against future revenues. They borrowed from the Fuggers, from Genoese bankers. When gold arrived, they repaid debts, opened larger lines of credit, waged larger wars. This spiral had to break one day, and it did. In 1588, Spain sent its great armada to England, 130 ships. More than 30,000 men, the largest naval military operation of the era. The result? Defeat. Storm and English tactics together destroyed the Spanish fleet. This defeat was not only military, it became the symbol of a psychological and financial collapse. Gold had hidden what Spain was doing wrong. Every problem was solved with money. Instead of increasing production, money was spent. Instead of investing in human capital, armies were maintained. These wrong choices went unseen for decades because gold covered everything. Then the gold diminished and everything became visible. The irony. Those who benefited most from American gold were not the Spanish. It was the English. It was the Dutch. It was the industrial nations of the north. Spain bought cloth from England, ship parts from Holland, metal tools from Germany. These purchases developed those countries' manufacturing, trade, and technology. England used the money it received to build its own factory system. Holland used the money it received to expand its trading companies. The most famous, the Dutch East India Company, was founded in 1602 and became the world's first publicly traded company. In other words, Spain earned the gold, but by spending, it strengthened other economies while weakening its own. There is a name for this lesson in economic history: Dutch disease. The principle is simple. An abundance of resources slows the development of other sectors. Because if easy money is available, there is no need to work hard. But when the easy money runs out, what is left? Wealth comes not from what you acquire, but from what you do with it. Spain received gold but did not build. England received money but spent it on building. That is the difference. And that difference completely changed the subsequent history of both countries. 2003, Baghdad had just fallen. An American journalist asks an Iraqi on the street, "What will you do with the oil now?" The answer is laughably simple. We will become rich. But we now know that idea was wrong from the very beginning. Venezuela was one of Latin America's wealthiest countries in the 1970s. Oil revenues were strong. Yet in the 2020s, the country faces hyperinflation, poverty, and crisis. Has the oil run out? No, the oil is still there. But systematically, oil revenues were used not to build, but to maintain. And then there are those who did it right. Norway. When oil was found, they channeled it into a state fund. They did not spend the oil itself. They invested the returns. Today, Norway's government pension fund is one of the world's largest investment funds, with assets exceeding $1 trillion. And Norwegians are secure for the day the oil eventually runs out. What is the difference? The difference between Spain and Norway is simple. One used it to buy, the other used it to build. It is the same in personal finance. The gap between those who increase their spending when their salary rises and those who channel that same increase into investments becomes enormous 20 years later. Resource equals wealth. That formula is wrong. The correct formula is resource plus correct use equals wealth. The resource itself is only an opportunity. How you make use of that opportunity is a choice only you can make. In 16th century Spain, there was an economist named Luis Ortiz. In 1558, he wrote a memorandum to Spanish King Philip II. In that document, he wrote plainly, "We export raw materials and import processed goods. This will impoverish the country." Did the king read it? Most likely, yes. Did he listen? No. Because gold was coming. Everything looked fine. And people, whether individuals or states, do not want to change when things look fine. This is history's most bitter lesson. The greatest collapses begin in the most brilliant-looking moments. In the 1500s, Spain was the world's most powerful empire. It had its armada. It had its gold. It had its empire. 100 years later, by the mid-1600s, that empire had begun to fall apart. Holland won its independence. Portugal broke away. France grew stronger. England rose. Spain rose to the peak because of gold. It fell because of gold. But these two golds were different. The first, the gold that arrived. The second, the act of relying on the gold that arrived. John H. Eliot writes that Spain's problem was not a lack of resources. The problem was that the mentality governing those resources had failed to modernize. That sentence holds true today. For any country, for any individual. One final number about Spain. 1,492. Columbus sets foot on the shores of America. 1,588. The Great Armada is defeated. 1,648. With the Peace of Westphalia, Spain recognizes Dutch independence 156 years. An empire was born, reached its peak and collapsed. The reason? Not an enemy, not a disaster. The reason was ships full of millions in gold. The most costly illusion is not the idea of becoming rich. The most costly illusion is this. If gold is coming to me, I no longer need to build and create. That idea, that single idea, sank the Spanish Empire. Do not let it sink you.